You know, the key to success is pretty easy. It's just showing up consistently. And I'm glad you showed up. I'm so happy you're here. I'm Samaj. This is Creating with Semaj. And every day we show up for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. Usually it's around 20 minutes that we sit and we paint. We get things out of our head, out of our bodies, and onto paper. We use nonverbal communication in the form of painting because it's a way to really have a conversation without having a conversation. And I appreciate you being here. I hope you're enjoying the journey as you are expressing yourself through your creative play. So if you're ready to play, grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab your supplies, and let's go to the page and see what shows up today. I had some crazy dreams last night, and I just think dreams at large are crazy. They're crazy things. Sometimes they leave more questions in the end than they leave answers. And sometimes the things that come together are pretty wackadoo. So I'm going to talk about the dream that I had last night because it's kind of interesting. But before we go there, I wanted to tell you that we're going to start with our Canson XL and our Praying Oval 16 because it's easy and available, and you know, that's what we like. So I think I'm still sleepy from my dream because it was very, very active. So let's talk about that. Turn the page, see what shows up. So last night I had this dream that was just insane. And like the biggest thing about the dream, and I don't even know if I can draw this, but let's see. When I was a child, my grandmother had a Hoover vacuum cleaner. And that Hoover vacuum cleaner literally was my best friend. I would talk to the Hoover vacuum, and my grandmother used to ride me around the living room and all the rooms sitting on it, and it was amazing. And it had I am going to do it such little justice. It was an upright Hoover, and it had this amazing hood on top of it. So it sort of was rounded, and then it had another little top, and I used to sit on that top. It's probably where the motor was. And that little vacuum cleaner decided last night to come and give me a visit as an inanimate object. That's the word, an inanimate object coming to have a conversation with me. And you know, I guess it's like, so I guess it was a lucid dream because there was a point in it that I was like, you're a vacuum cleaner. And it says, and I'm like, well, the information is really insightful. And he says, well, that's the information that you need. And I just thought, you know, coming as a vacuum cleaner, something that was familiar to you from your childhood would give you, you know, maybe a better sense to listen. And I thought, interesting. It also brought a lot of comfort in just seeing the vacuum cleaner. And then there was this, and the vacuum cleaner had like really insightful information. Like it was really astounding. And I didn't quite understand how it got that insight and information, but it certainly did. And you know, they always say that dreams are really your subconscious coming up and talking to you and piecing together things that you're trying to work out. So that was interesting. And then I had this giant horn that came in, literally like at first it thought it was a blowhorn, but then it turned into like a musical instrument horn, and it started playing all of these sounds that I remember from my childhood, like, but not trumpet or horn sounds, right? It was like different. Maybe it was a speaker and not a horn, but it had like all the things on it like a horn did. It was really interesting. And then it took me to the giant oak tree that used to be behind my grandmother's house. And the oak tree had in it this amazing swing and what was really strange in the dream is the vacuum cleaner was there on the swing with me, and we were sitting side by side, and it was talking to me as we were swinging on the swing from the oak tree that was in the backyard. It was just amazing. So I grew up in California, and I grew up in the Salinas Valley. And my grandparents owned a house that had a huge field and lot behind it because it was just open space. And then across the street from our house were the fields for Tanimura and Antle, where they used to do grow all the crops. And they used to grow broccoli and cauliflower and celery and Brussels sprouts and lettuce, iceberg lettuce, Boston leaf lettuce, romaine lettuce, and it was crazy. And here's a crazy story. When I was a kid, I would stand out in the front yard right in front of the crop dusters as they flew over and dropped their chemicals all over the land. And this was probably like 1969. Exactly. So, crazy, right? So, but that swing was there last night, and it was holding me and Mr. Hoover. Now, you know what? I'm just suddenly thinking, I'm pretty sure it was a Hoover, but then suddenly just into my head flew Eureka. But, you know, I think the Eureka was the canister vacuum. No, that was the Electrolux that my grandmother had. She had an Electrolux. That was fancy when that showed up at the house. That was a big fancy day. It was a really high-end canister that you pulled behind you, and it had the electric broom portion that had the poor Hoover got put away when that came in. Maybe the Hoover couldn't be repaired, but I don't know. I loved that Hoover. It had a lot of stories to share with me. Isn't it weird, the things that you have in dreams and the things you remember? It's just, the mind is a crazy place. So many things are held there. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and we were speaking about childhood and memories of childhood. And she was saying that her childhood memories are not so vivid, that she has like a very sporadic memory of her childhood, but she has her best friend. Her best friend knows her childhood better than she knows her childhood. Like, her best friend will bring up events and situations, and my sister's like, so it comes to be that this friend of my sister's happens to have one of those memories where she catalogs everything. Like, you can give her a date and she can tell you exactly what happened, where she was, what she ate, where she's one of those people. I think that's incredibly fascinating. I'm like, how does that happen? How are you that person that you can just catalog all that information? But she has one of those incredible memories. Just so you can't ever get in a conversation with her about facts and dates, because she'll go through that Rolodex and she'll pull it out. She will pull it out and she'll say, no, I can go back, I can tell you. You give her a date, she'll tell you what day of the week it was, probably what the temperature was in the town that we used to live. Very funny. Very funny. So this Hoover vacuum cleaner, the biggest thing about it, it was purple. It was purple here, and that made me so happy whenever I would see it. And it was just this happy purple little vacuum cleaner. And then it had a little lip on the bottom of it, and that lip was white. But I don't know that the white's going to show up here. So we'll just pretend that that was white. I should have left it white. Oh, maybe I can still do that, right? We can lift off some color so it just has like a hint. There we go. All things are fixable, or, you know, we just work with it. And then the top of it up here was like a deeper kind of more of a mauvey color. So I'm gonna kind of a purpley eggplanty color. And then the bag was white, but it had that color stripes on it that came down. And on the back of it, it had a spring. I always remember that spring. I don't know why that spring, I remember that, but I certainly remember the spring that was on the back of it. And then it had like these little stars on the bag. And and this was like 1960, like 69. Because I lived with my grandmother until 1970, and then I lived on and off with her until, yeah, forever. Until she passed. But, yeah, it had these little, like, kind of those like little atomic starbursts that were big in the 60s. A lot of people had like boomerang countertops from Formica, and it had that same sort of design on it, like a little atomic symbol maybe. I'm not sure. Not the atomic symbol, but like a little starburst thing. Almost like a Sputnik. That's it. That's a Sputnik thing. Because, you know, it was all about the space travel. And a Hoover vacuum cleaner was very space age back in the day, apparently. Oh my goodness, this is just a crazy ramble of a whole video today, talking about dreams and how crazy they are. I think I'm the crazy one, right? Maybe the dream was lucid and I'm crazy. I don't know. What I know is that I enjoyed the conversation and all of the insight that came. And I can't even tell you what any of it was at this point in time. I just really remember in the conversation being really deeply moved. So maybe all that stuff's going to show up later. Right here on the very tip of it was a big red dot, and that's where it said Hoover written across it in white letters. It said Hoover in really nice fancy writing. So I think my grandfather had put this swing up for me in the backyard. For some reason I have memory of him cutting a piece of wood and putting it out there in the backyard for me. I also remember once climbing this tree too high and getting stuck, and him having to come with a ladder. And he had to climb up into the tree to get me, to bring me back down. So, yeah. I used to climb a lot when I was a kid. I used to like upward mobility. I remember, again, when I was a kid once, that I climbed the neighbor's pine tree because someone had a bird that had gotten out, like I think it was like a budgie or a parrot or something, and it flew into the tree. And I was determined I was going to be the one that was going to get that budgie out of the tree. And I kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And I got to the point that I got to the budgie, but both I and the budgie were higher than I expected to be. And the budgie was fine with the height, me, not so much. So I remember And this was, who was that? Who was that neighbor who came over? I don't know if it was Mr. Sayers who came over. It must have been Mr. Sayers. He was an amazing man. He had two kids, Ronnie and Teresa. I guess he was a military guy, his wife was German, her name was Edie. She made the most delicious dish called Svetchendachi, which is a German plum dessert that's made in the summer from Italian prunes. Oh, it is just heaven. Heaven, 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 and delicious. And she used to make that all the time. One of my favorite things of my childhood. Anyway, her husband, I remember having to come to the tree and get me down. Because it was in the... Who was that little girl that lived next door? Her mother used to invite us over, and she had dachshunds, and she had a daughter, and she used to do parties for us in the backyard. She would do like garden parties. She would set up garden parties, and she would do little sandwiches and beverages, and we would play with the dog. She was like a really magical mom. I don't even remember what her name was or what her daughter's name was. But they were the ones who had the tree that had the bird in it, so I must have just thought it was okay to go into her yard to get the bird, and I don't know if it was her bird. I don't even know whose bird it was, or where the bird came from, or how I found the bird. But I did catch the bird. Well, I didn't catch it, I reached out, I reached where it was, and together, the bird and we came down with Mr. Sayers, and I got to keep the bird. And I named him Petey the parakeet. And I had him for, I don't even know how many years I had him. I can't even tell you how many years I had him. I must have had him for 5-7 years. And for a kid who, granted, parakeets should live 15 years, but when you're a kid and you have no idea what you're doing with the bird, and you just find a bird in the wild, and maybe he was already old. Who knows? I don't know. It was pretty crazy, though. It was pretty crazy. He was purple and white, and he was Pete the parakeet. And he used to sing. He used to love to sing. Super, super, super duper singer all the time. So the whole point of that whole conversation today is just dreams are really weird things, and they show up, and maybe it was just going down memory lane, maybe remembering the Hoover vacuum cleaner and the joy that it brought me as a child. Maybe it was going down and remembering the experience of being in the tree and swinging, and then this horn that just loudspeaker that just kept ringing out all of these sounds. You know what the loudspeaker's from? I know what the loudspeaker's from. So, have you ever had the experience, I totally know what the loudspeaker's from now. It's not a horn, it is totally that speaker. So, when you're a kid and everything's really, really big and everything's larger than you think, and then you grow up and you become an adult and then the things are smaller than they actually were. Growing up in the town that I lived in, we had a telephone building for like AT&T, I think was the company, or maybe it was Bell, I don't know. And on the top of the building they had this giant speaker, like a giant speaker. And that has to be what that is, because I always remember how big and crazy it was as a child. So, dreams are interesting, and they make things show up. So, listen to them. Maybe it's just an opportunity to go down memory lane and, have a good reminisce about the past. Because that, I have to say, was a super fun adventure. And I know today we went over time because I was just rambling. But it's Sunday, and if you don't want to listen to me ramble, you can just, turn off the sound, because we don't need to listen to me. But I appreciate you being here with me today, spending time with me, embracing your creativity. Maybe take one of your dreams and put it down and just have it be symbols. And maybe in that you'll have a conversation and all the pieces of the puzzle will come together, because that's kind of what it feels like came here. All the pieces of the puzzle came together and eventually created a narrative, didn't it? A narrative I could share with you. Boy, I got a lot. That really smacked in that color. So I am Semaj. This is Creating with Semaj, and I so appreciate you being here with me. Remember, wherever you are, I trust you have the most amazing day. And until then,